relationships don't just happen to you. You
That's
can
right.
control
That's
what
right.
happens when it comes to relationships. And so if it's time to end, we want you to be in control of that.
Hi, I'm Colin.
And I'm Elitia, your favorite relationship coaches at When Love Works Dynamically. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today's topic is, how do you know when to end your relationship? So oftentimes people struggle with knowing when to end the relationship. And we want to just start out by saying, foundationally, love isn't enough to stick around. So today we're going to go into some of the red flags and just how to exit important love.
So, love is not enough that's not how I would phrase it. I would say just the presence of love is not enough. Love has to actualize, and that means you being active, you going out and doing the work to bring it to pass. And guess what? It's a job that's going to be with you for the rest of your life. But it's the type of work that's amazing if you do it right. Just the existence of love, that they're talking about, the chemistry that they started with. That was a free gift. You didn't have to do anything for that. You got Google eyes when you looked at that person, and they did the same for you.
Oftentimes, people are ignoring the flags and just staying together. And when they look up 6 months, a year, 2 years have passed, you go into family reunions and people like, oh, they call them auntie and uncle because y'all been together so long. And it's probably been time for that relationship to end. And one of the red flags we want you to be mindful of is sunk cost bias. Oftentimes people stay together committed because they feel like, I've invested 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, and I feel like I can't let it go. And that's oftentimes a red flag, because that's the only reason you're staying, is because of what you feel like you invested. Relationships are an investment. They're the most expensive thing you'll be in because they cost yourself.
Let that relationship go. You're not buying a car. If it's a bad relationship, plain factually bad, not judgmental bad, the relationship doesn't work for you, the best thing you could possibly do is ignore sunk cost bias and move on. Find your person. They're out there.
Another red flag is that limited or no communication. And unfortunately, a lot of people stay together trying to figure out or guess each other's minds. They try to guess each other's body language, or they try to guess each other's passive aggressive mood. And all three of those things are ineffective. And it's more than likely a red flag indicating that it's time to end that relationship. You've now changed into this person that's nonverbal. And we want the full expression of you in your relationships, not one that's being more aggressive.
Let me say this to you as well. This is one of my top. I have two I'm going to share with you, but my top one is, well, this is number two, and I'll go to number one after this. My number one red flag is dating somebody who is a fixed mindset, because this is a person who doesn't understand that relationships are all about service. And if they're not willing to grow with your relationship, then they're going to continue to be dating, but they're in a relationship with you. You guys are coupled off, but they're still operating like a single person. That will break the relationship. And my number one answer is this: no healthy relationship will ever impinge on your physical or psychological safety. And it will never impinge on your freedom. So, I mean, real love is always going to put those two things first: your freedom and your safety. They're going to be way up here, and it's never going to impinge on. In fact, it's going to do just the opposite. It's going to help you be your freest self. And if anything does anything to threaten that, run. It's not worth it.
Now, those were explicit red flags. And I know we had to name that abuse is non-negotiable. That's not even up for conversation. So those were some explicit red flags that we talked about.
And lying.
When it comes to ending a relationship.
If you're lying, you don't have a relationship. You basically, you introduce your representative to your partner. They didn't even get a chance to choose you, the genuine version of you. So now, at some point you will tire, and you start missing your lines and forgetting your lines, and the real you will show up. And now this person will be like tasked with now deciding whether you two are a fit. It's unfair. You can't do that to anybody. Going through that once is enough.
Run. So those were some explicit red flags. Now there are some subtle ones that creep up on you that we don't want you to just ignore or get used to or normalize. There's still indications that you need to end the relationship. And they are when you have these little signs of incompatibility where it's been a few months or even a year and you notice that your goals are diverging, you all haven't even checked in to figure out, okay, what's our next milestone point? What's our next benchmark? You don't really check in with one another. Now, that's a subtle one that can really creep up on you because time will just keep on going and life is going to keep on lifing and you all haven't come together. Again,
Right.
Relationships are about being. I want to be with you. And so if you have these subtle divergence of goals, of dreams, of, I don't know, physical, emotional next steps, then that's a subtle indication that you're probably going to grow apart and you're just not addressing it at the moment you recognize it. And so it's even better practice that you address it at the moment you recognize it versus allowing it to just happen and you just eventually drift apart.
If you're going to be in a relationship and have functionality, it has to be intentional. I highly recommend not waiting until you're in the middle of an argument to now decide how the two of you are going to deal with your struggles. What's wrong with game planning it? Going ahead when the both of you are in peace and say, look, I struggle with this.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to build a mechanism and it's got to be a peaceful one. And you have to unearth your traumas and your triggers.
Yeah.
If they're in there, if you overreact to something somebody says to you that you know loves you, probably being triggered by some past trauma that you have not resolved.
That's another subtle one that comes up. And so one of the things that we want you to just make sure that you're aware of is knowing your worth, your value, and your wants. And so for you, because after you do that type of work, you identify, is the person that I'm with someone that I want to continue to be in a relationship with, or is it time for me to end it?
So if you want to hear more about how to tackle arguments in a functional way, check out our other video.
So those were some of the red flags and subtle flags that will let you know it's time to end the relationship. But here's some work for you to do. You can be explicit and intentional with your practice by identifying your worth, identifying your value, and then your wants. So I know in our book, Love Literacy, we take you through the exercise in a relationship profile where you sit down and become intentional about what you need. And that right there is going to be proactive in that if things don't line up with your profile, you will then be the one that's articulating, this is probably, this is a connection that I need to end. You don't have to wait for the subtle signs, the red flags, for things to just drop in your lap. You will already be in the practice of aligning or seeing what doesn't align and then making a call. Listen, at When Love Works Dynamically, 3 C's are very clear. We want you to be have clarity. So we give you definitions, best practices. We also want you to have confidence. So the more you do, you build confidence. And lastly, we want you to have control. Relationships don't just happen to you. You can control what happens when it comes to relationships. And so if it's time to end, we want you to be in control of that.
Let me tell you something. If you have gone to a person and communicated how they've harmed you and it's met by silence, or or them minimizing it, or whatever, anything that's not a response back to it, oh man, I'm not trying to say you break up with that person right then, but you need to double down. And basically you're going to find out, is this your final answer? Because at the end of the day, if your well-being is not a priority, it's problematic. And so you're going to have to choose your well-being. I don't care how amazing this person is. If they are demonstrating that they can't make adjustments around harm that they've caused you, or at least have a conversation with you instead of giving you the silent treatment, you might have to choose well-being. And this might be a family member, friend, or somebody that you're dating. I don't want to just limit it to people that you're dating, because this could be a boss, somebody that you work with, somebody, a friend or family member. It's across the board. You have to ask yourself, am I being realistic about my expectations? I'm going to tell you this right here. Number one, we're all imperfect beings. All of us are. There are things you probably think you're the only one that sees and tolerates things with your partner. If you're getting mutuality from your partner, you're winning. I'm going to tell you that right off the top. You are winning. But your partner will never be perfect. That's what love is for. Love is there to make up the difference. That's the change jar on the side of the cash register. If you fall a little short, love is there to cover it, in the form of grace. So I can tell you this right now. Everybody requires love. And the things that you may think, well, I don't care what you say, guy, speaking to me over this thing, I'm way better than my partner is. You might be, but I can promise you, there are lots of things that have fallen in your blind spot because you've been with yourself forever. And I promise you, your partner, but I do. I promise you, your partner is turning a blind eye to stuff too, because they love you and they're saying, nobody's perfect, and they moved on. Do the same. Extend that back to them, because I promise you, even if you think that's not you, there will come a time when your partner will have to extend grace to you, and you're gonna want them to. You're gonna want that grace to be pure grace and not sarcastically. So now you need me to like you. Now you need me to look past something you did. You don't want that. You don't want to bloody. I mean, you don't want to muddy the water.
You've gone through the process, you thought it through, and you're the person that says, okay, I need to end this relationship.
First of all, let me just tell you this. The way we're introducing this here is almost unfair, because this is typically not a tidy process, especially the longer you've been in a relationship with the person. However, all of the elements are here. It might take place over time. Like it might not happen in one sitting or one conversation, and especially if you've been with that person for a long time. The tracks are, it's etched in there.
At One Love Works Dynamically, we want you to do things with grace and dignity. And so we call this conversation of disconnecting, uncoupling, parting in love. And so the first part of that is for you to own, step one, for you to confirm and own that you are leading the conversation to part in love. And oftentimes people will have a lot of guilt. They will prolong it. They will make excuses. They will say, if I'll do it, and you look up, it's another 3 months. So step one is to remove all guilt, own that you're going to lead the conversation to parting in love. That's step one. And I'm saying that repeatedly because that is the most difficult step. Oftentimes people stay because they have so much guilt, because they're remembering the highlights. The highlight reel keeps them there longer and longer. So you have to get very comfortable with leading this conversation that the other person may have a reaction to. Yes. So do whatever you have to do to get through step one. Step one, remove the guilt, lead the conversation. Step two, you're going to thank them for that time. Thank them for being in a relationship with you, whether it is 2 months, a month, 15 years, 17 years, whatever it is. Thank them for that, because relationships are the best ecosystem to develop and grow as an individual person. It's a mirror. So you had some development as a result of being in relationship with that other person. So thank them.
That's right.
You may not have specifics. We don't want you to lie, but thank them for just having the actual mechanism of what's called a relationship. And then after that, you're going to have to state the sentence. I want you to be you. I want me to be me. This is
some version
of that. Talk like you. But we have to part in this relationship. I want you to be your best self and find your person, and I want to do the same. You may not have to say that line. We don't know what triggers people, but you have to have an ending or disconnecting sentence so the person is not unclear about what the conversation is. You have to say, this is the end of us. Now, here's another part. That's an asterisk. After you do those steps, that's the 3 steps to partner in love. You might have to take a deep breath, because the person may have a reaction, but their reaction is not your responsibility.
That's right.
Parting in love puts them back into the ecosystem so they can find their person. And then you are free to find your person, or take a break if you want. But they may, as a human being, sometimes hearing news, we have a visceral reaction to it. But we want you to own the fact that their reaction is not your responsibility. That's right. You've done the work.
And the same thing goes back to you. Like you just have to remember, it's not your responsibility to be Mr. Right or Ms. Right. So walk away from it guilt-free. And when you do your part, when you part in love, the whole idea is to send them back out in the world as healthy as they were when they came to you, not harmed in any way, shape, or form.
We have to be responsible in our practice too. So while we gave you those 3 steps, we know that the parting in love is a whole session in the dating series.
Right.
So if you do the conscious dating series with us, that's a whole session, because we know breakups are not tidy. Oftentimes they can be, they don't have to be tumultuous, but there's going to be an actual role play and some unpacking and some emotion and some level setting that has to happen that makes those 3 steps more effective. So again, we want to just make sure that you aren't saying, oh yeah, I know that crap ain't gonna work. It works, but it's in the context of an actual session. So make sure you check out our conscious dating and conscious couple series. Now that you part in love, you made a decision, whether you practice the 3 steps or you have your own method, we understand that you may have challenges processing loss, because what happens is you have experienced a loss. Parting in love is an actual skill that we teach in our series, but you as a human being experiencing loss is the same process. So there are 7 stages of loss that you still have to navigate after you part in love. And so make sure that you, one, research that process of loss. You can identify where you are along the journey because it's a journey. You have disconnected from someone you were in relationship with. That is a loss. That is a journey of 7 steps. I can't give you how long each step takes, but what you will experience after that conversation is the 7 stages of loss. So be okay with that. Give yourself grace through them.
I know this was a lot to digest, and I know this is probably nobody's favorite subject to broach. But if you have further questions, come join our lovely the lounges.
First Tuesday of every month. Make sure you click the link in the comments. They're free sessions the first Tuesday of every month. Get your love lessons and get your practical tips to guide you on your journey.
Looking forward to seeing you there.